Hello all, welcome back to FAD Learning. In this video, we will covering everything you need to know about reactive forms in Angular. So by the end of this video, you will be able to answer any question about reactive form with practical examples. And I hope you watched my previous video where we explored the concept of Angular forms, which comes in two types, template driven forms and reactive forms. We have already covered template driven forms and now it's time to dive into reactive forms. So, what are reactive forms? In simple words, reactive forms are forms where you set up the structure and rules in your components code. You create a blueprint of your form using form groups, form controls, and form arrays, and then connect it to the form in your HTML template. So, let's start by understanding the required step to create a reactive form in Angular. To use reactive forms in Angular, first we need to import the reactive forms module, and this module provides all the necessary directives and constructs for building reactive forms in Angular. Second step is to create a form group instance, which can be done using either the form builder or the form group constructor. Third step is to create a form template in your component HTML file and map the form group instance to the form using the form group directive. Next step is to add form controls to your template form fields using the form control name directive. And the last step is to handle the form submission event and perform any necessary actions such as validating the form data or sending it to a server. So by following these 5 steps, we will create a reactive form similar to a template driven form. But before this, let's understand the building blocks of reactive forms. In the reactive forms approach, we need to build a form model using 3 essential components: form group, form control, and form array. And these 3 components are the building blocks of the Angular forms. A form control represents a single form control, such as an input field, checkbox, etc., and it tracks the value, validity, and dirty state of the control. Second, form group is a container for multiple form controls and it provides a way to manage multiple form controls as a single unit. And third building block is form array. It is a container for multiple form controls or form groups and it provides a way to manage multiple form controls or groups as a single unit. In addition to form controls, form groups, and form arrays, there are another important concept in reactive forms called form builder. It is a useful service, makes it easier to create form controls, form groups, and form arrays. But the form builder is not considered one of the fundamental building blocks of reactive forms. So now let's put all these concepts into practice and build a reactive form. So I will switch to the Visual Studio Code editor. And here, to save time, I have created a new component for the reactive form and added a new root for it. And also I included it in the navbar list. Here you can see reactive form with path ref. So now you can access the reactive forms directly from the navbar. So let me open the reactive form component to create a reactive form. And as per the first step, to start working with reactive forms, we need to import the reactive forms module, which is imported from Angular/forms module. And if you are working on a standalone component, add reactive forms module in the imports array of the same component like this. Otherwise, you need to import it in the root module or a shared module if you are working on module based application. Since we are working on a standalone component, I have imported it in the imports array. Now let's move on to the second step, creating a form group instance. In the template driven form, the forms module automatically creates form group and form control instances from the HTML template using the ng model directive. In contrast, reactive forms require us to manually build the form model using form group, form control, and form array. And in the template driven form, most of the code is written in the template file, whereas in reactive forms, we write the code in the class file. So first, I'll create a variable called reactive form of type form group. And now let's create a new form group instance which represents the entire form. So inside constructor, I'll write this dot reactive form equals to new form group. Now let's add form control instances inside the form group. And each form field needs its own form control. For example, I'll create a text input for a first name in template file and pair it with a form control instance, which I will name first name colon new form control. And I'll give it an initial value of an empty string. So with the help of new form group, we have created the instance of reactive form. And with the help of new form control, we have created the instance of first name field. Now similarly, I'll create form control instances for the other fields such as last name, email, password, and e-check. Password is of type number, so I'll remove the double quotes. And e-check is a type of boolean, so I'll remove this double quotes as well. Okay. So now each of these fields will have its own form control instance, and it allows us to track their values and validity separately. Now let's move on to the third step, creating a form template and mapping the form instance to the form group. So I'll go inside HTML file now, and to create form template, I'll copy the code from the template driven form component.html file and paste it into the reactive form component.html file. And I'll remove the unnecessary code related to the template driven form and convert this form to the basic HTML form. I'll add reactive form to the heading for clarity. And since we are working on reactive forms, we don't need the ng module or name attribute. So I'll remove those code from all the fields along with the built-in validators and error messages. Okay, so I have now converted this template driven form into the normal HTML form. And as per our third step, we need to map it to the form group. And in template driven forms, we used the hash symbol to create a template reference variable and link it to the ng form directive. However, in the reactive forms, we need to bind the newly created form to this HTML form tag. And to do this, we will use the form group directive in square brackets and assign it to the form name. What is our form name? Our form name is reactive form. So this code will connect our form template to the form group instance, which we have created few minutes before. Okay. So this was our third step, creating a form template and mapping the form instance to the form group. Now moving on to the next step, that is adding form controls to our template form fields. Since each form field corresponds to one form control, so we will bind these instances using the form control name attribute in each respective field. On the other hand, in template driven forms, where we use ng model directive along with name attribute to bind form field values. But in reactive form, we only need to use the form control name attribute. So let's add form control name attribute to all fields. And the value of form control name attribute should be matched with this form control instance. Now I'll copy this form control name attribute from here and quickly I'll paste it for rest of the fields. This is for last name, here for email, this form control name for password, and here for e-checked. Okay. Now with this, we have completed the fourth step as well. Now the final step is form submission. So we need to call the onSubmit function. And to call the onSubmit function, we have two options. Here we have already created a submit button And if the type of submit button is submit, so in this case, we can use the ng submit directive in the form element. So here inside round bracket, I'll write ng submit equals to on submit. So either I can call on submit method like this using ng submit directive, or we can call the on submit method with the click event in the submit button like this. Okay. So I'll go with ng submit directive. Now next, let's define the onSubmit method inside the class file. And this method return an object with a value property. So inside console.log, I'll write reactive form.value. Okay. So with this, we have completed all 5 steps of the reactive form. Now let's go ahead and print out all the form values to the console. So let me open developer tool and let me enter some values into all the fields. First name, let's see, Poonam. Last name, Patel. Email, poonam@gmail.com. Password, 12345. And I'll select this checkbox. Now, when I submit the form, I'll receive an object containing all the form fields with their entered values. Okay, so everything is working as expected till now. Now, we have our top level form group, that is reactive form. But we can also create nested form groups if needed. For example, we can create a separate form group for the address similar to our reactive form. So inside this reactive form, I'll create an address form group, address colon new form group. And inside this, I'll declare address related form controls such as city colon new form control, and I'll pass empty string. Similarly, I'll add 2 more fields. Second is for street and third is for pin code. And I'll remove this double quotes for pin code. Okay. Now our form model has 2 form groups. The top level form group named reactive form and a nested form group named address. And we have already used the form group and form control name attributes to connect our top level form group, that is reactive form, to the template. Now, to link this nested form group to the template, we will add a form group name directive to the template. So after this check me out, let me take one more div, and here I'll write the attribute form group name equals to address. So this is our nested form group name. And we have linked this nested form group with template with the help of form group name attribute. I'll add class margin 2 for this div as well. And inside this div, I'll add an h5 tag with margin 2 class for address. And after this h5, I'll add 3 new fields. So I'll copy this div and paste it 3 times. And let me edit the label. This is for city, this div for street, and this div for pin code. And placeholder will be enter city name, enter street name, and enter pin code. And last, I'll bind these fields to their respective form control names. So for city, we need to bind form control name with city. For street, so street, and for pin code, I need to write pin code. And this form control name should be matched with this form control instances. Okay, so now let's print the value of address form group. Let me enter the city name, Mumbai, street name, Journey Road, and pin code 12345. And once I click on submit button, here you can see we are getting a separate object for address containing all the address related fields like city, pin code, and street. Okay, so we are able to print the value of nested form group as well. Now next, similar to what we did in template driven forms, let's disable this submit button if the form is invalid. And to disable the submit button, we can use either the valid property with not operator or the invalid property of the form. So let's use property binding to disable the submit button. I'll wrap the disabled attribute in square brackets and set its value to reactive form.invalid. And this will disable the submit button if the form is invalid. And to test this, we will make the form invalid by marking a field as required. So for first name, I'll add required. Now let's check in the browser. And as expected, when the page loads, the submit button is disabled because the first name field is required. But as soon as I type something into the first name field, the submit button becomes enabled. If I remove the value from first name, it becomes disabled. And if I enter any value to this required field, the submit button becomes enabled. So this behavior is same as in template driven forms. Okay. Now let's see how to set default values in reactive forms. In template driven forms, we used the set value and patch value methods to set the default values. And we will use the same methods to fill reactive form controls. And we can set default values in two ways, either by setting the value while adding form controls inside the form groups. Like this, we can pass the default values, or by using the set value and patch value methods. So let's try using the set value method first. And I repeat, we use set value method when we want to update all form fields. So when using set value method, we need to provide values for all controls, which means we can't use it for the partial date. Okay. So I'll copy the buttons from template driven form and paste it inside the reactive forms. Here I'll comment out these two buttons and let's work on set value button. And this time I'll add the button name set all values with a click event that calls the set all values function without parameter. Then in our TypeScript file, I'll define the set all values function, which will call the set value method on our reactive form. So here this dot reactive form dot set value, and inside this method I'll create an object with key value pairs for all fields, where the keys are the form control names like first name, and the values are set according to our requirement. So I'll set Poonam for first name. Next for last name, I'll set Patel. Next is email, poonam@gmail.com. Next password, I'll set 123. Next is check, I'll set true. After this, I need to set the values for nested form group as well. So we need to write the nested form group name, that is address, colon, inside curly brackets. Again, we need to pass the address related form fields value. So city, I'll set Mumbai. Street, I'll set Churni Road. And last pin code 1234. So this is how we need to set the all fields value in order to use the set value method. Now save the changes and let's click on the set all values button. Must supply the value for form control name with each check. Okay, each checked. Here C should be in caps. Okay, because while creating the form group instance, I have written C in caps. Okay, now let me click on set all values, and as you can see, the form fields populated with the provided values. And in order to reset the form, we can use reset method. And to do this, I'll add one more button inside the template file called reset. And when this reset button click, it will call a function named reset form. Next, we need to define this reset form inside TS file. And this method simply calls the reset method. So here I'll call reactive form.reset. That's it. Now let's populate the form fields by clicking the set all values button and then reset the form using the reset button. Okay. Now let's try using the patch value method. And when to use patch value method? When we only want to update some of the form controls, not all of them. So this patch value method allows us to fill in partial controls of the form. Okay. And to demonstrate this, let me uncomment this patch value button and update this with set partial values. And I'll edit the function name with set partial value. And I'll not pass any parameter to this function. Okay. So let's define this function inside the TS file. And this method calls the patch value method on our reactive form. So let's call the reactive form dot patch value, and inside this patch value I'll paste this same address object with key value pairs of the required fields. So with this patch value method we can set the required fields. We don't need to set the value for all the fields. Okay, so in this case I want to set the address related fields only. So now when I click on the set partial button, only the address fields are populated. And when I click the set all values button, all fields are populated. So it means we have two options to populate form controls. We can use set value method to fill all controls at once. Or we can use patch value method to fill only some of the controls. And we can also update or reset a single form control value using the syntax reactive form dot controls. And here we can access the specific form control using the controls property. And we can add control name in square brackets like first name. And then we can use the patch value method to update the controls value. So inside patch value, we need to set the value. Here I'll set Poonam, semicolon. So I'll just comment out this code for now. And let's reset the same field on click of reset button. So I'll comment out this line number 59, and here instead of patch value, I'll call reset method. That's it. Now here by using this controls property on click of set partial values, we are setting the first name field value to Poonam, and on click of reset button, we will reset the first name field. So let's test this on the browser. When I click on the set partial values, as you can see, only the first name field is populated. And to populate all fields, I click on the set all values button. And finally, when I click on the reset button, only the first name field is reset. Here you can see because of this line number 60. So we can use this syntax to update a single form control value when needed. And on the other hand, use this syntax to update multiple form control values at once, especially when dealing with nested form groups like this address group. So this is useful when updating a group of related fields. Now last, we can disable a reactive form field by using the disable property. So let's try this out. For example, if I want to disable a checkbox field, I'll call the disable property. Like here reactive form dot controls. Inside square bracket, I'll pass the control name, that is eCheck dot disable, and round brackets. That's it. Now let's check the result in the browser. And here you can see I cannot click on this checkbox because it is disabled. Let me set the default value to true. And now you can see the checkbox is disabled and I cannot uncheck or check it. So in reactive forms, we can enable or disable properties as needed. Just like the disable property, we can use the enable property to enable a field. So far we have covered how to create the reactive form. After that, we have explored how to set default values using set value and patch value methods. And we have explored two building blocks of Angular forms, that is form group and form control. Now next, to understand form array better, we will first examine form builder, which makes it easier to understand form array. So let's start with form builder. So building multiple forms with form group and form control can be lengthy and time consuming. As you can see here, creating each form field requires repeating the same code. Fortunately, Angular offers a solution called Form Builder. The form builder is a service that simplifies the process and making it easier to create instances of form control, form group, and form array with less code. And we need to follow only two steps to use form builder. First is inject the form builder service into your component constructor. So here, let me inject it with private fb colon form builder, and it is imported from Angular / forms module. So this is the first step to use form builder. Now second step is use form builder to generate our form controls. So now we need to refactor this reactive form to use form builder service, such as instead of creating a new form group, I'll use form builder.group. So this .fb.group. And inside this reactive form, for each form control, we need to pass an array with an initial value, which can be empty or a default value. So let me paste this array to all form controls. Here we are getting an error because here also we need to use form builder instead of form group. So this .fb.group. Now save the changes. And as you can see, the code is now more concise and less repetitive. But either way, whether using form builder or form group, the template code remains the same. So it means we can switch to form builder without making any changes to our template. Okay. So hope you understand the use of form builder. Now let's move forward and learn about the third building block of Angular forms called form array. And form array is the extension of form group and form control, and it helps us to handle dynamic form controls. So when do we use form array? Form array becomes essential when dealing with forms that have a changing number of form controls or form fields. For example, we are creating a form where users can add or remove their skills. But one user might have two skills while other has five. So this kind of situation, we should use form array. So the key difference between form group and form array is that form group is a collection of form fields, while form array allows us to add or remove fields dynamically. So to understand more, let's create a simple example of form array where users can add or remove skills. So first, let's add a skill array similar to the nested form group for address. But this time we will use form array instead of form group. So let's write skills colon this dot fb dot. So for form array, here we need to write array. And this initialize the form array with an empty array. That's it. This is our normal form group. And this is our nested form group. And these are our form controls. And this is our form array. Now, to access this skills form array, we need to create a getter method. And we can define the getter method using the get keyword. So get followed by the getter method name, let's say skills, which is of type form array. And in this method, we should return the skills form array from the reactive form. So I'll write return this dot reactive form dot get inside round bracket. I'll write skills as form array. So this as form array informs TypeScript that the returned value should be treated as a form array. Okay. Now next step is we have to define the structure of our form array. And to do this, I'll create another method called new skills. And this method returns a form group containing a single form control named skill with an initial value of an empty string. So here, instead of creating a form control directly, I'll use a form builder to create a form group. So before this skill, I'll return this dot fb dot group to this skill inside this form builder dot group. So now this method will generate a new form group instance representing a single skill. However, we can add here as many form controls as needed. Like we can add experience, project, etc. But I'll go with only skill. Okay. So inside TS file, we have created a form array. After that, we have created a getter method, and then we have created a new form group instance. Now, inside template file, after this check me out, I'll create a div with class form group and margin 2. And to map the nested form group with template, we used the form group name attribute. Similarly, to map the form array with the template, we use the form array name attribute equals to skills. Now next, I'll create a button.btn.btn primary, and button name is add skill. And on click of this button, it will call the add skill method. So let's define the same method in the TS file. This method adds the new skill to the skills form array. So I'll write this dot skills dot push, and inside round bracket I'll write this dot new skill. So this creates a new form group instance using the new skill method and pushes it into the form array using the push method. Now inside template file, I'll use the ng for directive to iterate over the controls in the skills form array. So here inside div, let me use star ng for equals to let skill of skills dot controls, and I'll declare an index using let I equals to index, which assigns a current index to a variable I. And inside this loop, I'll add one more div for each skill. So I'll bind this div to the form group at the current index I. So I'll use the form group name directive inside square bracket equals to I. And now I'll display the skill number starting from 1. So inside double curly brackets, I'll write I plus 1 because index starts from 0. And then I'll write text skill name, and after that input text field for the skill name. And to bind the input field to the skill form control, I'll use form control name attribute equals to skill. And last I'll create one more button, delete. And this button called the delete skill method. Click equals to delete skill to delete the skill at the current index I. So now let's define the same method inside TS file, delete skill, and it takes one parameter I of type number, which represents the index of the skill to be deleted. So inside this method, we will use the remove at method to remove or delete form group instance at the specified index I. Okay. So far we have added two buttons, add skill and delete button, which triggers the add skill and delete skill functions respectively. And when we click on add skill button, a text input field appears to enter a skill. And when we click delete button, the corresponding skill and input box disappear. So let's observe the browser's behavior. And I'll click on add skill button. We are getting an error. Can't bind ng. Okay. In order to use ng for directive, we need to import the common module or the ng for inside the imports array. So let me import common module. And now let me click on add skill button. And this time, as expected, an input field appears and it allowing me to enter my skill. And when I click the delete button, the skill and the input box disappear. So this is how we can add multiple skills. So let me add few more skills and I'll submit the form. Angular, then React, then third skill I'll add Java. And now submit button is disabled because of the first name field is required. So let me type Poonam. and click on the submit button. After submitting the form, if we open the developer tools, I'll clear the console and let me click on submit button again. And here we can see the skill array with skills Angular, React and Java. And if I delete any skill, the updated array is reflected in the console. Here you can see. Now we are getting array with skills Angular and Java. Okay, so this is how form array works in Angular. And I hope you understand the concept of all three fundamental building blocks of Angular. Just to recap, form control represents a single form field, and form group represents a collection of form controls, and form array represents a dynamic array of form controls. Now let's dive into reactive form validations. And as we learned earlier in the template driven form, Angular provides 5 built-in validators: required, min length, max length, email, and pattern. And in the template driven form, we added validations directly in the template file. However, in reactive forms, we will use these same validations in the class file. So to start, I'll remove the required validator from first name field. And to use validators in reactive form, first we need to import validators from Angular/forms module. Validators. A validator is a function that checks an instance of form control, form group, and form array, and it returns a list of errors. And if the validator returns null, it means the validation has passed. And we can add multiple validators to an array separated by commas. So let's add the required validator to first 4 fields. After this empty string, I'll add an array, and inside this array, we can add multiple validators. First, I'll add validators dot required, and the same validator I'll paste for last name, email, and password. Now next, I'll add rest 4 validators as well. So let me add pattern validator to the first name field, validators dot pattern, and inside round bracket, I'll copy the same pattern which we have provided in the template driven form and paste it here. Now next, I'll add min length validator to the last name field, validators dot min length with minimum of 10 characters. Next, I'll add max length validator to the email field, validators dot max length, and I'll specify a maximum of 15 characters. And also I'll add email validators to the email field, validators dot email. Okay, so I have added 5 built-in validators to these 4 fields. And by using these validators, we can ensure our form data meets the required criteria. Now save the changes and let's test the validations in the browser. And as we have already disabled the submit button for invalid forms, we need to fill the first 4 fields correctly to enable it. So since we have added required validators to these fields, I'll start by adding ABC1234 to all 4 fields. First name, last name, email, and password. So as per required validator, we have added values to all 4 fields. But if you notice, the submit button remains disabled due to the other validators such as min length, max length, pattern, and email. So let's correct each field one by one. For first name field, we have added required and pattern validator. And since we have already entered the values in all 4 fields, we have taken care of the required validator. So let's focus on the other validators. That is, for first name, we have added pattern validator. And this pattern only allows characters from A to Z. So to fix this, I'll remove the numbers from first name field. Now let's move on to the next field, last name. And for last name, we have added required and min length, and it requires a minimum length of 10 characters. So I need to update this field with 10 or more characters. So let me type few more characters and move on to the next validator. Next validator is max length. It has a maximum length of 15 characters for the email field. So I'll ensure the email value is less than 15 characters. And we have added only 7 characters. So this value we have added as per our max length validator. Now last validator is email validator, and it requires a proper email format such as abc@gmail.com. So as soon as I update the email field value with proper format, you will see that the submit button becomes enabled. However, if I miss any validator, the submit button will become disabled again. For example, if I add more than 15 characters to the email field, the submit button will be disabled. So this demonstrates that our built-in validators are working as expected with reactive forms as well. Now let's add error messages for users to understand what went wrong. And to do this, I'll copy the if block from template driven form and paste it into reactive form. So after this first name, I wish to add the error messages. And in reactive form, we can access each form control using the form name dot controls property. And our form name is reactive form dot controls. And inside square bracket, we need to pass the respective form control name. So I'll pass first name. Okay. So this syntax allows us to access form controls without creating local variables for each field. So let me update the code using this syntax. And for first name field, we have added required and pattern validator. So here, let me update with pattern. And the error message for pattern validator is first name does not match the required pattern. Let me remove this star round bracket and now save the changes. Let's test our form on the browser. Let me refresh the browser. And when I click on the first name field and then leave it empty, the required validator is triggered and displaying an error message, first name is required. Similarly, when I type a number or special character like 1234 or dollar, percentage, etc., the pattern validator is triggered and displaying an error message, first name does not match the required pattern. Okay. Now quickly add similar error message to the rest of the validators. So let me copy this if block and paste it below this last name field. Let me update this first name with last name. And for last name field, we have added required and mean length validator. So here I'll update with mean length, and the message for mean length is the minimum length of the last name should be 10. After that, I'll add the same if block to the email validator. Here, instead of last name, write email. And for email, we have added three validators: required, max length, and email. So here I'll update with max length and here with email. And the message for max length validator, the maximum length should not exceed 15 characters. And last error message for email validator is please enter a valid email address. After that, we will need to add only required validator to this password field. So let me delete these two validators and I'll keep only required validator. Let me update this email field with password. Okay, so with this, we have added respective error message to all these four fields. Now let's retest the form. And when I click on all four fields and leave them empty, the required validator is triggered for each field and displaying the respective error messages. And as expected, when I type a number or special character in the first name field, the pattern validator is triggered with an error message. So let me remove this and add proper name, that is Poonam. Now next, if I type less than 10 characters in the last name field, the mean length validator is triggered with an error message. The minimum length of the last name should be 10. In order to disappear this error message, I need to write 10 or more than 10 characters. Now next, if I type an email address with an improper format, the email validator is triggered with an error message. Please enter a valid email address. So let me type valid email address poonam@gmail.com. But it exceeds the 15 character limit in the email field. So in this case, email validator message disappears and the max length validator is triggered, displaying an error message. The maximum length should not exceed 15 characters. So I need to delete some characters from this email address. And last, for password field, we have added only required validator, so I can type anything inside password field. Okay, so this is how we have checked all the validators and our form is working as expected, along with displaying helpful error messages to guide the user. So that's all about reactive forms. And we have now covered the essentials of Angular forms. We have learned how to create template driven forms as well as reactive forms. Under this, we have explored how to set default values, reset forms, and add built in validators with error messages. Additionally, throughout this tutorial, I have highlighted the key differences between template-driven form and reactive form to help you to understand the concepts better. But before we stop, if you feel confident about Angular forms, please like, share, and subscribe to FAD Learning for more useful content. Thank you for watching, and we will meet again in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.